Behemshech, in continuation to the classes that we've already had on Emunah and Bitachon, we'll go through another point and maybe more complicated issues regarding Emunah and Bitachon, and in connection with Yud Shvat this year, Shnas HaShivim. And this year, once again, will be L'schus refua shelaima for Akiva, Gershon ben Rachel Basya. As we've seen already, Emunah and Bitachon are interconnected. Emunah is the prerequisite for Bitachon, and Bitachon is what completes Emunah. Without Emunah, there can't be Bitachon, but without Bitachon, the Emunah is not necessarily real. It hasn't been made real. Emunah is the realization and the knowledge of the Eibishter, knowing what the Eibishter is, the belief in the Eibishter, and according to the Eibishter, whom one believes in, and according to the powers and the abilities of the Eibishter that one believes in, that's what type of Bitachon he has, the trust that I trust in the one whom I believe in. And at the same time, when I trust in him, that's what makes it real, the belief. That it's not just an abstract belief, but it becomes something real in my life, and especially according to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, and according to the teachings of Rabbi Basya and Shara Bitachon, and specifically according to the Baal Shem Tov's explanation of it, it's something which becomes real in my life. This is my life, this is the reality. And as we've already seen, Bitachon does not just mean that I trust that it could be good, that the Eibishter has the power to make it good if he wants to, but rather Bitachon is that my trust in Hashem is so powerful, my belief in Hashem is so powerful, that as a result I actually trust in him, and I'm certain that not only he can, but he will make it good in a teva nireva niglan, an open and a revealed good, in a way that's seen and understood to me, to the extent that my life changes already now. That my life already at the moment is lived in a way of 100% certainty in the good that the Eibishter will give me. Based on that idea, there's a question, which in general is a question that's asked in many Chakira Sfarim and many of the Machshava Sfarim, that Emunah and Bitachon seem to contradict each other. Because part of Emunah is not just that I believe in the Eibishter, but that I believe that everything comes from him, which means that whatever happened yesterday, and whatever happened to me in the past, even if it was something that wasn't in an open and revealed good, even if it was something that I couldn't understand the good, it was like the words of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, it was from a good of Alma Diskasya, was a hidden good, and nevertheless I know without the shadow of a doubt that that comes from Hashem and that it's for my ultimate good. On the other hand, we say Bitachon is that I'm certain and I trust beyond the shadow of a doubt that the future will be good in an open and revealed good in a way that I can understand and see the good to my physical eyes. But how do the two go together? What happened yesterday, even though it was something which to me didn't seem like good, it seemed like the opposite of good, I have no question and no doubt that it came from Hashem for my good. And yet at the same time, I'm certain that in the future, not only will it be a good that I can't see, but it will without the shadow of a doubt be a good that I can see and I can feel, to the extent that I'm able to rejoice, not just about the fact that whatever happens comes from Hashem, but about the fact that Hashem will give me something which I will recognize and appreciate the good. The truth is, a similar question is asked with regards to the general idea of the belief in the coming of Mashiach. When on one hand we believe in Hashem, and that's the reality, And the fact that Mashiach didn't come till now, no matter how much I don't understand it, it came from Hashem because that's what Hashem wanted, and He wanted it for my good. And at the same time, I have this trust now that now Mashiach will come for sure now. What happened until now when I trusted it? Where was He? And this question is a question which causes many to come up with all kinds of ideas and explanations because it's a very hard and tough question to explain. I'm going to try and explain it according to the Rebbe's explanation, first quoting what the Rebbe says, and then we're going to try and understand it to the best of our ability. The Rebbe explains that because a Jew is connected to Hashem, and Hashem is Nimna Nimnois, for Hashem there's no contradictions. In the reality of the essence of Hashem, there's no such a thing, there's nothing that's not possible. And therefore, in that connection that a Jew has to Hashem, because of that connection that a Jew has to the essence of Hashem, a Jew is also asked of and able to live in a way of Nimna Nimnois and to be able to have both opposites, the belief and the trust, the belief in the past and the trust in the future. A concept and an explanation which seems very hard to understand. How do we make this practical in our lives? So first, based on what we understood up until now, that my emunah is what brings my bitachon. Meaning that if my emunah, my realization is the fact, the power of atzmos, of the essence of Hashem, a power which is beyond the concept of contradiction, then my bitachon also is in such a way. Let's look at a very interesting farbrengen of the Rebbe from Shabbos Parshas Va'era, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Tafshin Chav Beis, 1962. A large portion of that farbrengen, or the main part that we're going to discuss now, is actually edited by the Rebbe and printed in Likutei Sichos for Parshas Va'era. Before we go on to that farbrengen, there was a very interesting guest present at that farbrengen. And I don't know whether yes or no, whether that has anything to do with what was spoken about by the farbrengen, but it certainly looks like it's connected. There was a big English rabbi. His name was Rabbi Koppel Rosen. He was one of his look, everything, you could see a real British rabbi, one who was extremely involved in chinuch. His education, although he came from a Chassidish family of Rab Domsker Chassidim, but his education was in Mir in Poland, by the Bali Musar. And then he came back to England and he took on education. He made Carmel schools, and which was a brand that was later copied in various other places in the world. A model that was later copied in other places in the world because of its great success. This rabbi also was a friend of Lubavitch, a very good friend of Lubavitch, who helped out in the Lubavitch educational work, especially in England at that time. It must have been in the beginning of that year, in 1962, or perhaps a little before that he was diagnosed with a very violent form of leukemia. And he decided, I'm in Hashem's hands. I'm going to do what Hashem wants. Doctors can't tell me what's going to happen to me. And yet later, as time progressed, it seemed like things were happening, and he got more and more sick. And Rabbi Ben Zion Shemtev, who was a Shadar in England, came to visit him and convinced him to go to the Rebbe. He went to the Rebbe, and if I'm not mistaken, this was his second visit to the Rebbe on Shabbos Parshas Vayera. He went into Yechidus on Thursday night. It was apparently a 2-hour Yechidus. At that time, he was barely able to move. He couldn't walk more than a few steps without having to sit down because of his weakness. And yet he was there in Yechidus, or he stood in Yechidus for 2 hours. At that Yechidus, the Rebbe told him a lot of amazing things, and the Rebbe gave him a lot of very powerful brachas. And as I heard from people who were there at that time in Crown Heights, they saw him walking on Eastern Parkway, something which had seemed impossible beforehand because of his weakness. Shabbos, he was by the Fabrengen. Shabbos Parshas Vayera was it was Rosh Chodesh Shvat. After the Fabrengen, he was quoted as saying that he feels like this is his personal Matan Torah. This story was a very widespread story to the extent that there were many versions that spread around of the story. Up even till today, you'll find all types of versions of the story. But in truth, he was extremely inspired by his visit to the Rebbe. He went back to England, and instead of falling into depression, on the contrary, he began to strengthen even more. At the Rebbe's suggestion, he let his beard grow full. He started to daven with a gartel and to learn Tanya every day. And although, unfortunately, he passed away a month later, but that month was a month spent giving encouragement to whoever came to visit him. And he wrote to all his friends about the Rebbe, writing, "This is someone that I've met, that I've never met someone like this, someone anything like this ever before." From a friend of Lubavitch, he became, one can say, a total chassid of the Rebbe, and one who was completely pushed to tell others and to bring others to the understanding of the greatness of the Rebbe. Let's look at the Fabrengen of that Shabbos. But first, before we go there, there's a very interesting letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe, where the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe about the idea of moifsim. What is moifsim? The Rebbe wrote a letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe, writing that it's true in Chabad, by the Chabad Rebbe's moifsim, there was never an emphasis on moifsim, on spreading miracles. But the Rebbe says we see that today people are tired, people are weak, and teaching them, telling them miracles, or performing miracles for them is something which can inspire them and uplift their spirit. That was what the Rebbe wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe responded with a very long letter, in which the Frierdiker Rebbe explains at length the difference between the Chabad approach and the approach of the other Chassidim. And the Frierdiker Rebbe there quotes the saying that by the Rebbe Maharash, the moifsim were rolling under the table, but nobody bothered to bend down to pick them up. In other words, the emphasis was on understanding Hashem, on learning Chassidus and being inspired to understand the greatness of Hashem, and not on moifsim, on miracles. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe tells a story of a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. This chassid was a young man, or an older bacher, who had originally been a chassid of a different Rebbe, and he came to be a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, a chassid of Chabad, and he began to go in the path of Chabad, to daven at length, to learn Chassidus, to learn a lot of Chassidus, etc. But his friends, who were the other Chassidim, they would taunt him. And they would say, your Rebbe is a great person and everything else, but if he's really a Rebbe, tell us a miracle, tell us a maifis. Because by the other Chassidim and by the other Rebbes, one of the big emphasis was on spreading and on telling miracle stories. And it bothered him, it hurt him, it broke him. Not that he had doubt, but that he had nothing to answer them. They would taunt him all the time. Why can't you tell us a miracle of your Rebbe? And one day the Mashpia in town got a letter from the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe wrote, be mekarev this bacher, bring him closer, have influence on him, and it will be for him a sign, and for others, for him it will be a sign, for others it will be a miracle. The Mashpia called over the bacher and showed him what the Alter Rebbe had written about him. And the bacher began to cry. He said, the Rebbe knows what was going on inside my heart. What bothered me, what I didn't even speak to anyone else about. And sure enough, it was a miracle for the others that he could tell them, look, the Rebbe knows what's going on. And the Mashpia said to the bacher the following, to take a piece of wood and make a mensch out of him, make a person out of him, that's the greatest possible miracle. And this the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in the letter to the Rebbe. It's interesting that there's a letter from the Rebbe where the Rebbe takes this letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe in a understanding a little bit different than what most people understand. The Rebbe understands from this letter of the previous Rebbe that miracles are good, that miracles are important, but they need to have a goal and a purpose. Which means, for a lot of people, a miracle, a maifis, means that I can understand and I can see the great, amazing accomplishment of the Eibishter, so to speak. Whereas in Chabad, a maifis, the concept of a maifis is not the fact that I can see the Eibishter's greatness, but rather more than that, that there's something which changes me, something that transforms me, something that makes me connect to the greatness of the Eibishter. And that's why the emphasis is put mostly on learning Chassidus and understanding the greatness of the Eibishter. And if a miracle is done or a miracle is publicized, it's not one which is limited to my understanding, but rather one which connects me to an Eibishter who I don't have to understand, who's beyond my understanding. Like the famous story of the Chassid of the Frierdiker Rebbe. He was together with a bunch of other Chassidim who were all telling miracles of their Rebbes. And he told a miracle story of the Frierdiker Rebbe. He says, the Frierdiker Rebbe told me a certain thing that I should invest in, and I invested and I lost the money. So he said, where's the miracle? The other Chassidim said to him, where's the miracle? And he said, the miracle is that I remained a Chassid. And it's not just a cop-out. Here, we Chabad Chassidim, no matter what, we remain Chassidim of the Rebbe. It's the true understanding of the reality of what a maifis means. It's an Eibishter and a Rebbe who brings the Eibishter to us, who's not limited in our understanding, in our perception, but a Rebbe that goes beyond that, but that brings to us an Eibishter who's beyond my perception, an Eibishter who's real, who's not just making miracles for me that I can understand and appreciate. And yet at the same time, it's miracles. But the depth of the miracle is changing a person. Changing a person's life, making him appreciate something so much deeper. And like in this story, that the person is able to go and walk, and with the fact that we don't necessarily understand why or how the story ended the way it ended. And it doesn't make a difference why and how. But the point is what happened at that time, that a person should be so invigorated that he can actually walk around, and so invigorated that he can come back and spend his last days on earth spreading and influencing others. And yet at the same time, that same Eibishter that we have the faith in is one that the bitachon has demanded of us, not because it's something false, because it's a true bitachon of this same Eibishter, that when we can connect to something deeper and know that this Eibishter can and will, beyond the shadow of a doubt, give me something which is beyond all limitations. I heard a story from someone. Jew in South Africa. We're talking about quite a few years ago, in Tafshin Lamed Gimel in 1973. He went to the Rabbi. His brother was diagnosed with a rare heart disease at a very young age. He went to the Rabbi. He brought the file, a thick file of all the medical files of his brother that the doctors said he doesn't have much time left. He was a young man, 21. When he was diagnosed with the disease, I don't know what year that was, in 1973, he went into Yechidus to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to him the following: he should do what the Eibishter wants from him. And the Eibishter is Roifei Chol Basar Umafli Lases. And the Rebbe emphasized the words Umafli Lases. Hashem is the one who heals all flesh, and he does wonders. And in this case, the wonders that Hashem showed, he lived for close to 30 years after that. What is this mafli lasos that we have to be able to have that contradiction in our lives, and how do we get it? In the Fabrengen of Parshas Vayera, the Rebbe asks a question. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Hashem. Hashem sends him to Mitzrayim to go to Paroi and to tell Paroi to let the Jewish people go. Paroi not only doesn't let the Jewish people go, he makes a stronger decree, and he says from now on they won't even be given straw. They'll have to go around and find their own straw. Moshe Rabbeinu goes back to Hashem. And the way the Rebbe explains it is, usually when there's a mission given and it's not successful, there's a few options. Either the one who sent, the sender, the mishaleach, there's something lacking, or the shliach, the messenger, there's something lacking, or in the shlichus, the mission that was given, there's something lacking. In this case, Moshe Rabbeinu made a cheshbon, he made a calculation. The Mishaleach, the sender, is the Eibishter himself. The Shliach is Moshe Rabbeinu. The Shlichus is the Geula which has been promised. How did it go wrong? What went wrong over here? And Moshe Rabbeinu came back to the Eibishter and he said, Lama riyoysa lama zeh. Lama zeh shlachtani. Why did you do bad to this people? Why did you send me? You sent me on a mission to make things better for the Jewish people. Not only is it not better, it's getting worse. What does the Eibishter answer Moshe Rabbeinu? Va'eira el Avram, el Yitzchak, el Yaakov, and like the Chazal say, like Rashi brings, Chaval al diavdin v'lo mishtachin yesh li liseinin al misas ha'avis. Hashem says, I can now feel the loss of the avos. I gave them so many promises, they never asked any questions, even when they didn't see them happen. Here, you're sent on one mission, it doesn't work, and you come back with a taina. And the Rebbe asks a few questions, and again, I don't want to go through everything that the Rebbe explains, just the point. It's printed in Likutei Sichos Chelek Gimel of Parshas Vayera. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu ask a question? Why does the Torah tell us, the Torah that's so careful not to speak bad about anyone? And here we're talking about the Mivchar Mina Anushi, the chosen of mankind, and the Torah saying something seemingly so negative about him that he doesn't have proper faith in Hashem? And what exactly is the Torah telling us about the avos of Moshe Rabbeinu? And like the Rebbe says, that we know that everything in Torah is a lesson. If Torah tells us this, that means that there are two paths open before every person. Today, now, in Tafshin Pei, every person has two options to choose from. He can go in the direction, in the path of Moshe Rabbeinu, or in the path of the avos, and the Torah is telling us choose the path of the avos. What's going on? Us, we, in our time, in our situation, we can choose between Moshe Rabbeinu and the avos. We're told to choose the path of the avos. And the Rebbe explains the following. Moshe Rabbeinu and the avos, each one was a specific type of Jew. Each one had a specific type of avodah. Moshe Rabbeinu was like the head. His avodah was one of intellect, of understanding. The avos were the midas, like the heart. Their divine service was made up of the idea of feeling. Avraham Avinu Chesed, Yitzchak Avinu Gvura, Yaakov Avinu Tiferes, which connects both. And the Rebbe goes on to explain exactly how each one is a specific emotional attribute. The difference between the head and the heart is that the head has to understand everything. The heart feels and goes according to the feeling. Moshe Rabbeinu was unable to continue, and he had a question. Chas v'sholom, he didn't doubt Hashem. But without understanding, without having an understanding of what was going on, he couldn't continue. He had a question that disturbed him. He had a question that came in his way. And Moshe Rabbeinu's question was, how come it doesn't come down? Of course the Eibishter is complete. The Eibishter is 100% good. But if this is coming from the Eibishter and he sent me on a mission to bring it into the world, how come it doesn't come down into the practical physical world? Why doesn't it continue? Why doesn't it come from abstract into reality? The Eibishter is Kol Yachol. The Avos never had such a question because they followed simple Avodah of heart. Their Avodah was midas. Their Avodah was feeling. Now what are the differences the Rebbe says between intellect and feeling? Intellect remains in the understanding and it doesn't necessarily come down into the world. It's about understanding it. Feeling is something which causes a person to act upon it. And intellect is something which I can only do if I understand. Feeling reaches to a place which is higher than intellect because feeling means this is what it is. It's not only something which is understood. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, you're right. In your avodah of moichin, of intellect, it's not something which can be drawn down into the world, into feeling. But then Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ani Havaya. The reason for Galus Mitzrayim and Gulas Mitzrayim, the reason why Jews were exiled in Egypt and later came out of Egypt, was in order to be able to reach the revelation of Havaya, which connects two opposites, which merges two things that are complete contradictions to each other. That's Shem Havaya. That's the ultimate of Matan Torah, where the spiritual Torah can come down into the physical world. And Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, true, your direction is moichin intellect. But now that there's Geula of Mitzrayim coming, now there's the revelation of Havaya, you're able to, even in your intellect, have that Kabbalah's oil, that simple faith that the Avos had in me. And therefore also to bring it down practically. How? Through Galus and Gulas Mitzrayim. The Rebbe gives an example in the Farbrengen, the part that wasn't edited. And the Rebbe gives an example in a person. There is the blood, which the blood in general of the person shows on intellect, shows on emotions. But yet in the blood, there's two types of blood. In a person's body, there's two types of blood cells. There's the white blood cells and the red blood cells. The white blood cells are the ones that their job, start with the red blood cells, their job is to feed the person. They bring the life to the person's body. They bring the person's vitality to him. The white blood cells are there to fight off diseases, to fight off infections, etc. There's more red blood cells than white blood cells because the mission of a person and the main purpose of the person is Asay Toiv, is positive and practical rather than Sur Meirah. And even though Sur Meirah is important, Asay Toiv is more important. And yet the Rebbe asks a question. Red shows usually on Gvura, white shows on Chesed. Why is it that the white blood cells are the ones that are fighting, the fighting cells, and the red blood cells are the ones that bring the Chesed, that bring down the vitality to the person? And the Rebbe says because this is something that we see in the person's body, the idea of Iskalolus. The idea that everything has to be brought out and expressed through the opposite. White, which is chesed, is the fighter, the one that does the gvura, the idea of gvura. Red, which is gvura, is the one that does the bringing down the chesed. And this, the Rebbe says, is what Hashem demanded of Moshe Rabbeinu. Have a iskalus, an inclusion, allow things to go together, allow the opposites to come together and to merge. By that Farbrengen, the Rebbe also spoke about health, and the Rebbe said that it says in the Rambam, "Ayois aguf bori v'shali midarke avodas Hashem." The fact that the body should be healthy and complete, that's part of the ways of Hashem. And the Rebbe said that the opposite is also true, that when a person does avodas Hashem, and a person realizes that his mission is actually to bring and to educate others and to take whatever he was taught and to give it to others and to transmit it to others, then that brings that he should be not only body healthy, but shalim complete. Shalim complete, meaning that retroactively, Ani Hashem Reifecha, it takes away any type of sickness that he may have. It makes him complete, not just healthy, but complete. So to summarize what is in this Farbrengen, an amazingly powerful idea that the Rebbe explains. That a Jew has a mission to learn from the Avos, to go in the path of the Avos. How? By the fact that a person, after Matan Torah, it's revealed to us Shem Havaya. Why is it that after Matan Torah we have the revelation of Havaya? Because we were in Mitzrayim, because we went through the darkness, because we went through the hardship. Darkness brings out in a person the ultimate light. The Rebbe connects it to this year's kapitel, to a word from the Alter Rebbe on the pasuk, Haidu Hashem ki tov, ki lo'olam chazdoi. Haidu Hashem ki tov. Praise Hashem, for He is good. What's good? Tov ein tov ela Torah. Good means Torah. Torah comes from Hashem. There's the mitzvahs, the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. They were given to us by Hashem. Yoimar no Yisrael. When is there Yoimar no Yisrael? Yoimar no Yisrael is what we added to the Torah. The 7 mitzvahs, the Rabbanan, the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs, which they split into 3 types. Kayanim, Leviim, and Yisrael, Yoimar no Yisrael, Yoimar no Bisar, and Yoimar no Hashem. They come from us. They come from below. How did the mitzvahs, the rabbinic mitzvahs came? All of them, each and every one of them came from an aspect of darkness in the world. It was the darkness in the world that people weren't keeping Shabbos properly, which caused the idea after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, which caused the mitzvah of Muktzah. Same thing is with the mitzvah of Netilas Yadayim, the idea of an addition of Tumah and Tara. The same thing is with Chanukah and Purim, which all came from a darkness in the world. The darkness in the world brings out an ability of a more powerful light that comes from below. That from us we can reach a level where we connect to the essence of Hashem in a space that we're able to connect to something which is beyond the world, beyond the regular idea of godliness that comes into the world. That connection to the Eibishter that comes from Yoimar no Yisrael, that comes from darkness. And the same thing is in a person's life. When we have a state of darkness, when we don't understand, when we don't recognize, when we feel like things don't make sense, it's there that we can actually recognize the essence of Hashem that's beyond limitation, that nothing limits and nothing comes in His way. Not even the fact that yesterday seemed like one type of thing and today it's supposed to be the opposite. That yesterday what happened, I believed that what didn't happen yet was for a good reason, and now I have to come to the opposite. But most important is that it's the reaching and understanding of an Eibishter. Like we said, the bitachon comes from Emunah. An Eibishter that's beyond understanding, an Eibishter that's not limited to my understanding and to my way of understanding Him, to my miraculous appreciation of the Eibishter's miracles, but rather an Eibishter that I can connect to, who's above and beyond understanding, who's able to connect two opposites to the extent that I could live with that connection and actually internalize that connection of the two opposites. Let's go on from that to another idea of the Verbringen of Parshas Beis, Tafshin and Beis. Something which a lot of people struggle with. Again, the seeming contradictions. It was Gimel Shvat, the 3rd day of Shvat, Wednesday, after Mincha, the Rebbe said a Sikha suddenly. And the Sikha the Rebbe said, we're now beginning the final week of preparation for Yud Shvat, and every new beginning needs extra help, because Kol Haschal is Kashis. And the way to have that extra help is through Simcha. And the Rebbe went on to tell that this is something that we saw by the Frierdiker Rebbe, that in his life he was always in a state of simcha, in a state of great joy, despite the hardships that he went through? What was one of the greatest hardships? The fact that his doctor, who was a professor, said to the Frierdiker Rebbe that it doesn't seem to make sense. That seemingly being that your mission in this world is to spread Chassidus through speaking, then you should be able to speak at least as good as others, and perhaps even better, even more powerful than others. And yet, your bodily suffering affected you to the extent that it severely limits your power of speech, which as a result limits the ability of saying Chassidus, the ability also of, like the Rebbe says, of the Chassidus being written down and transmitted, because if there's a lack in the saying, there's a lack also in the continuation of how it's given over. And the doctor said, how does it make sense? It doesn't seem to make sense. And yet the Frierdiker Rebbe continued to do his avodah with simcha, which means there was a question which didn't necessarily have an answer. And like the Rebbe says, that this question is a good question, and the proof is because when Moshe Rabbeinu came with this same complaint and with this same question to Hashem, how can I go to Pari V'Ani Aral Sfosayim when I'm limited in my ability of speech? And Hashem said, you're right, which is why Hashem said, Aaron Achicha Yeh Nevi'echa. You'll have Aaron to be able to transmit what you say to Pari, which means it is a proper timer. And yet it didn't disturb the Frierdiker Rebbe in his avodah with simcha. The fact that it didn't make sense and that he didn't understand not only didn't stop him from doing what he had to do, but he was able to continue to do it with the greatest possible joy, which joy usually comes from understanding when everything makes sense. Which means for him, it was as much as if everything made sense. And the Rebbe then continued in this Sikha. And the Rebbe says that one of the lessons that we have, besides for the fact that we have to also serve Hashem with joy, the lesson that we take from this is that in previous generations there was an Aaron. In other words, there were others who were able to transmit the teachings of a Rebbe, even if there was a lack in the ability of he himself to do it. Now there's no Aaron, and therefore every chassid has to be the Aaron through the fact that he learns the Rebbe's Torah, and he does it in a way of speaking and in a way of spreading and teaching it to others until that brings and inspires to action. First of all, we see over here an amazing thing. There's a famous Gemara in Sanhedrin where the Gemara says, Yesi, v'lo yachmini. There's the Amoraim speaking and they say, let Mashiach come. I don't want to see him. I don't want to be there to see him. And the Gemara goes on and discusses why did they say, I don't want to see him. What were they afraid of? And what comes out from the Gemara is they were afraid of things that don't make sense. Because these Amoraim were on a level that they were the ultimate of Chachma, of Kedusha, like Moshe Rabbeinu. And the fact that there'll come things that don't make sense would stand in the way of their Avodah, the way it was meant to be. Until one of the Amoraim said, Yesi v'achmine, let Mashiach come. I want to see him. Ve'eska, the Esuv, Betula, the Chufisa, the Chamre. I should merit to sit in the shadow of the dung of his donkey. What kind of words are these? He's teaching us a very deep concept. If you want to be able to be there, that it shouldn't bother you, it shouldn't disturb you, even though things don't make sense. You have to understand that not only you don't understand anything about Mashiach, but even Mashiach's donkey and even what comes out of his donkey. This is the Avodah in Chassidus. It explains the Avodah of Netzach and Hod. The Avodah of Netzach and Hod, and especially Netzach, is victory which comes from a level that's above understanding. It comes from the essence. I'm connected because I'm connected. The fact that I don't understand is not going to make any difference. And like the Rebbe says in a Maimer, a question doesn't make things weaker and a proof doesn't make things stronger. Why? Not because of the fact that we're just accepting. Because of the fact that we are able, as a result of the darkness, because of the darkness, specifically us who are in a level where we don't have the same type of understanding and feeling that they did. Because of the darkness, that's how we're able to get the mitzvahs, the Rabbanan, which the Gemara tells us are greater than the mitzvahs of the Torah. As a result of the darkness, we're able to connect in our essence to something that's beyond understanding, which therefore we can have the greatest joy even when we don't understand and even when it doesn't make sense. Even when there seems to be a question that the Torah itself acknowledges this question. And yet it's demanded of us to not only be in that state, but to be in a state where we have an undeniable faith with a certainty in the Eibishter to the extent that we can know beyond the shadow of a doubt despite the questions. And questions which are according to the Torah, because we know that what happened yesterday was from the Eibishter and was for our good. And at the same time be able to have an undeniable and an unquestionable faith that this is the reality and truth to the extent that I can celebrate it now. Together with that, in that Sikha, there was something which we understood then when we heard the Sikha. And a month and a half later, we understood even more that the Rebbe wasn't only speaking about the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe was talking about the Nasi of our generation. And the Rebbe was telling us if there's a lack in the spreading of Chassidus because of a lack in the power of speech in the leader of a generation, in Moshe of the generation, every Chassid has to be the Aaron and complete that speech. It was something which was understood, something which was obvious. And even more when a month and a half later, the Rebbe had this stroke and we stopped hearing the Rebbe speaking and saying Sichas. And that's one side. And then the other side is the edited version of the Sikha that the Rebbe gave out. And again, we're not going to go through the whole thing. Everyone can learn it, and everyone, I'm sure, has learned it on their own. But just through a few points to understand deeper what the Rebbe is saying. The edited version of the Sikha, which included the Fabrengen of Shabbos, Parshas Beis. And the Rebbe began with a question. What does Beis el Parei mean? Come to Parei. The Zohar asks a question. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, come to Parei. Why come to Parei? Go to Parei. What's the question of the Zohar? The Rebbe explains it here in the Sikha, and in fact, 1 year previously, the Rebbe explained it a little bit more expressly. The question of the Zohar. The words Beis el Parei are found already in Parshas Va'era by some of the other Makkos as well. The question here is Beis el Parei, come to Parei and do what? Everywhere else where Hashem tells Moshe come to Parei, He tells Moshe Rabbeinu come to Parei and tell him so and so. Tell him about this Makkah, about the other Makkah. In the beginning of Parshas Beis, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Beis el Parei, come to Parei. Do what? So Rashi, because of this question, says, and warn him. But the pasuk doesn't say what. And even Rashi doesn't say what to warn him. And so the Zohar takes from this the following, and explains also with this the words Bayal Parei. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, right now it's time for the Geula. Until now it was Makis. Until now it was all aspects and ideas. Now it's the time for the actual and complete Geula. In order to bring that Geula, Bayal Parei, you must come to Parei and wage war against the essence of the Klippa of Parei, the way he is inside his palace in his most inner chambers. Break that Klippa of Parei. But what does break a Klippa mean? Klippa is a covering. Klippa is not a real existence. And yet Klippa is something that Hashem gives the power for it to exist. The Klippa of Parei is such a strong Klippa which Hashem created in the world, one that doesn't give space whatsoever for the understanding of Hashem. How can I break that? How can I bring godliness into such a thing when it's created by Hashem himself? And Hashem said, because Bayal Parei, because I'm taking you, because the whole Klippa, the whole place for doubt was created by me in order that you should be able to recognize or make it itself recognize the truth. And therefore, I'm now taking you to recognize who made this Klippa, that you should be able to overcome it. But even more than that, Hashem is now telling Moshe not only Bayal Parei to the essence of the Klippa of Parei, but Bayal Parei to Parei of Kedusha. Everything that's in this world, in Klippa, the Torah is talking about how it is in the holy levels in its actual source. If something down here comes to a level of the ultimate denial of Hashem, that it completely denies the existence of Hashem, that means its source in Kedusha is the very essence of godliness, where godliness is the most revealed thing that there is. What does it mean, Bayal Parei to Parei of Kedusha? It's time to reveal the essence of godliness in the world. It's time to leave Mitzrayim, which Mitzrayim is the opposite of the revelation of godliness. It's time for V'yadu ki ani avaya. It's time for V'yadu Yisrael ki ani avaya. It's time for the world to recognize the essence of Hashem. Even more than that and deeper than that in Matan Torah, in the giving of the Torah, when godliness, the essence of godliness is revealed in the world. How will that happen? So Hashem said now the Nasi Adar, the leader of the generation, has to come to Parei. The leader of the generation has to come to that place. Has to come to the place, the essence of godliness, and internalize that essence of godliness in order to be able to bring it down into the world. Moshe was afraid. What was Moshe afraid of? He was afraid, how can a creation, how can a physical human being come to such a place? It's impossible. I can't come to a place which is beyond understanding. And that's why when Parei said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Lo yisaisif rois panai, you won't see my face anymore. Ki b'yoyim ro'oischa panai, tam was the day you see my face, you'll die. And Moshe says, Kein dibarta, you're right. And the Rebbe explains, why is Moshe Rabbeinu telling him you're right? Because in the essence of what Parei was saying, he's saying to see the inner essence of Parei. The word Parei means revealed, uncovered. To see the essence of godliness the way it's uncovered, it's impossible for a human being to see it and to remain alive. Because a human being is limited, his neshama is inside his body. The neshama is contained by a physical body. To come to a place which is beyond limitations, beyond any type of being contained, doesn't enable the neshama to be contained in the body. The neshama has to leave the body because it reaches a level which is beyond being able to be contained. And that's why he said, yes, according to the reality, a nivra, creation who sees this great deep essence will die. Can't continue to live inside this physical contained world. So Hashem said to him, Boyel Pare, I will take you there. The power of Atzmus. And the Rebbe explains this. What's the meaning of the words that it says in Zohar? Ispiriu vizgalyon minei kol nahayrin. All the lights, all the godly energy, the godly revelation is uncovered and it's revealed in a totally unlimited fashion in this level. And if it's an unlimited fashion of revelation where everything is to get where it's beyond being able to be contained in anything, the body is not able to be contained, the soul can't be contained in the body. But the Rebbe says there's another explanation of his periyu v'izgalin minei kol nahayrin, and that is that the godly energy receives this power through the power of the essence of Hashem. That's how it shines and it's revealed in the world. And Hashem says, this is what I'm going to bring to you. I'm going to reveal to you the essence of Hashem that's beyond limitation, beyond the opposite of limitation, beyond being limited or unlimited. And therefore I can connect the two things together. And here the Rebbe says that this is the concept of our generation, of Bayal Paroi in our generation. In our generation, Bayal Paroi means that Hashem said to the Nasi of the generation, to the Frierdiker Rebbe, when it came Yud Shvat, which was Shabbos Parshas Beis, he said, Bayal Paroi, come to this level of Paroi. What happened when he came to the level of Paroi? His soul left his body. It connected to the essence of Hashem. Why did he come to the level of Paroi? In order to give us the power down here in the physical world. He didn't do it for himself, for his soul to leave his body. But he reached the highest levels because as a result, he can give us a higher power of the Bayal Paroi that we should also be able to receive it. And to understand that idea. When Moshe Rabbeinu came to Paroi, why did Hashem make such a miracle that he should be able to come to Paroi and yet his neshama should be able to remain in his body? Because Hashem said, now we're about to go out of Mitzrayim, there's about to be Geula. And Geula is a time that connects the spiritual and the physical. Matan Torah is a time that connects the spiritual and the physical. And this was also why when Moshe Rabbeinu said, Kvad Pel Kvad Loshen Anoichi, and the Zohar explains that the Dibur was in Galus, the speech of Moshe Rabbeinu was in Galus, it was contained, it wasn't able to be expressed. It was such a high level it couldn't be expressed. And Hashem said, Misam Pel Adam, Halayanoichi Avaya. Who enables someone to be able to speak the power of Atzmas, the essence of Hashem? He can do anything. He can make something that's not able to be contained, not able to be expressed. He can make it be able to be expressed. But there was a difference in the way it happened. When Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Paroi, then miraculously his words were able to be heard. And when the Torah was given, the ultimate connection happened between the spiritual and the physical, then the highest spiritual levels were able to be expressed. Then Moshe Rabbeinu was healed. Then Moshe Rabbeinu's speech became also let out of Galus. It was redeemed. It was able to be expressed fully. And so the Rebbe says like this. This is the difference between the 8th generation from the Baal Shem Tov and the 9th generation from the Baal Shem Tov. The 8th generation from the Baal Shem Tov, when there was Boyal Pare, it was in a way that the Nasi Adar, the Neshama, went beyond and above the body. Because it wasn't yet time for the Gula, wasn't yet able to be expressed in the world. Whereas the 9th generation from the Baal Shem Tov, we continue as neshamas in bodies, and the Nasi Adar continues as a neshama inside a body, because now is already the time for the Gula when it's completely connected. And also the neshama in the body in a way that's above Kvad Peh and Kvad Lashon, where the Dibur, the speech, is also no longer in Galus. So just to understand and explain the seeming contradiction between the Sikha, the way it was said by the Rabbi, and the Sikha, the way it was edited by the Rabbi, or the way we understood it when it was said by the Rabbi, was there'll be a time when the Nasi Adar, there's a limitation on the power of speech. Go out, study his Torah, spread his Torah, overcome that limitation. It doesn't make sense, still continue to be besimcha. In the edited version of the Sikha, the Rebbe tells us, in the 9th generation, no longer will there be a limitation of the soul not being in the body, no longer will there be a limitation of speech. But it seems like we see both those things. Can anyone say there was no limitation in speech? But when someone learns the Sikha and understands and learns also the Mamarim that explain it, which now is not the time to go in at length, but in the Mamarim that explain Misam Pella Adam, it explains that in the way it's expressed, Moshe Rabbeinu's question was, how do I bring it down into the world? Moshe Rabbeinu was there, Moshe Rabbeinu reached that level. But he said, how can it be expressed into the world? And Hashem said, for that is the power of Atzmos. Moshe Rabbeinu gives the Jewish people the power of Atzmos. He's able to bring something that's seemingly above the world, or that's really above the world, and which seemingly can't be expressed in the physical world. He's able to express it so that the world can actually understand it, perceive it, and connect to it. When we come in our generation in Daira Shvi, where we're told this is the final generations, the one that bring the Shechina down here. The limitation is on our perception, and the Avodah is given to us just like the Yoimar No Yisrael. The Avodah of Iskalulus, of including, of putting together two opposites, of putting together the red and the white, of putting together the positive and the negative. The Avodah of bringing down into a world something that seems to be above the world. The Avodah of connecting intellect and emotions, of putting them together, of being able to understand, and yet in our understanding still have that simplicity of the essence of faith. That's something which doesn't make sense. That's the power of Atzmos. The ability to be able to recognize that whatever happened yesterday came from Hashem and it was for my good, and yet the ability to realize beyond the shadow of a doubt that it will be the open and revealed good. That even though I didn't see Mashiach till now, I'm going to see him now. That ability is something which comes from the power of Atzmos that's given to us by a Rebbe. A Rebbe that enables us to be able to be in a state where seemingly I'm lacking health, and yet be so beyond it until I actually change retroactively. To be in a state where seemingly I'm in a world which is a dark world, and yet allow the darkness to bring out in me an essence of connection which is above. To be able to realize, to be in a world that seems to be a dark world, which doesn't hear the Rebbe speaking, a dark world which doesn't seem to see and recognize and understand the reality and the existence of the Rebbe, because it seems to be a spiritual thing which is above the physical world. and to be able to bring it down and to live with it, not through understanding, to understand and not understand at the same time. And it's therefore up to us, it's our power that we can do, that we can make it real in our lives through learning about Mashiach, through learning the Rebbe Sichos, through learning deeply the Rebbe Sichos and understanding it, until we make it to a reality in our life where we can live with a real Rebbe, with a live Rebbe, with a Rebbe who continues to give and continues to speak and continues to bring down godliness into the world, despite us not being able to feel and understand it at this moment. And through us living that, by being the Aaron, we actually bring it down into our consciousness, and as a result, make it become real in the real world. And like this year's 70 years is 7 times 10. 70 years is taking every aspect of the world from below. And like someone mentioned, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the day he became a Nasi, was already like he was 70 years old. The Rebbe on Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud already had the mile of 70 years old, if not before. It takes 70 years in this world of bringing that 70, the completion of 70, into our reality, until we get, like the Maimer of Basya this year, the idea of Tzivos Hashem. Tzivos Hashem means in a world that seems to be a dark world, a world that doesn't recognize Hashem, as it's explained in the Mamarim of Chassidus. In this world, we make this world Tzivos Hashem, we make this world be one with Hashem. And as a result, just like the Yidden, the Tzivos Hashem, they went out of Mitzrayim. Also we, at the end of 70 years of Nesias, we already brought that completion of Tzivos Hashem, of making the world and godliness become completely one in our consciousness, with understanding and not understanding at the same time, in the world that sees it and doesn't see it at the same time, until we bring it in a way that Ispiriyu, it becomes uncovered and revealed in a way that the whole world could see it. That the whole world sees and recognizes and appreciates, and that we appreciate the full revelation of Mashiach and the building of the Beis HaMikdash immediately.